Welcome to the Honest Art Podcast. I'm your host, Jody King. As an artist for 20 years, instructor, speaker, author, and fellow rebel, I've worked with thousands of people around the world, from beginners to established artists, helping them create their strongest art and build a career doing what they love. So if you are ready to have a little fun while you learn about art, creativity, building a thriving art business, and living a bold, audacious life, you are in the right place. Also, if you're considering going pro in your art business, grab the PDF in the show notes on the 5 things they don't teach you in art school. All right, let's get messy. Hello and welcome back. It's such an honor that you return week after week to listen or to watch the podcast. This week, especially, you're going to get a ton out of the episode, and you're going to fall in love with my very special guest, Anna Stapleton, who is going to share her story, which is absolutely fascinating. But you're going to get a lot also out of her experience of working as, y'all wait for this, ready? An art consultant, an art department coordinator on feature films, and a stylist placing art in hotels and restaurants and other high-profile venues, all while also being a writer and an artist herself and an incredible mom to 4 kids. Lucky for me, she's also a dear friend. So we decided to do this interview in the flesh. We had a couple of hiccups even early on, and we're like, no, we're gonna do this because we want to do this together. So everyone out there, be sure to head to YouTube if you want to watch us and to check out the full video. This is so exciting. Say hello to the brilliant and talented and gorgeous Anna Stapleton.
Hello.
That was such a breathy hello. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I'm super excited to be here with you. I have been listening to the podcast since you started it. And in fact, I think I knew about the podcast before you started it. And I had all these ideas for you.
You did.
And here I am. It was such a surprise that you asked me to be on it. And I'm so honored. But every single time I listen to it, I just feel so grateful because you're so generous with everything that you share. And I learned something new, and you're just the best. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Speaking of generous, you are so incredibly generous. All right. So I'm going to give Anna her due. And before we dive in, I want to talk to you about some of her accomplishments. So just bear with me, Anna. Okay. Pretend I'm not in the room. All right. Anna Stapleton is a Mexican-born writer, stylist, and artist living in Austin, Texas. Her creative career spans the worlds of art, film, hospitality, and design. A lifelong treasure hunter, which I love that you said that. She's drawn to the mystery and history of found objects. Her studio work, I can't wait to talk about your art. Her studio work explores feminine identity, cultural duality, and dreamscapes. And she wears dresses most days to avoid having to match separates, but clearly she went rogue today. And should we tell people how the day started?
Oh, yes, please do.
So Anna and I have a tendency to have similar it's just this very weird thing that we have. But before the podcast, we were talking about what should I wear, blah, blah, blah. And so I had on this orangish red cashmere cropped sweater, and you texted me and said, okay, well, I'm wearing this orangish red cashmere sweater. That's when the day started. Y'all probably don't care about that, but we thought it was pretty.
We actually do have a picture I'll post on Instagram of us in these matching sweaters we didn't know we were going to wear, but we did.
Yes. So I changed.
Thanks for changing.
You're welcome. That's a good friend.
Yeah.
Who changes.
You're a good friend. Yeah.
All right. So let's get into the podcast because you've got so much value that you can bring to the listeners, to whether you're an artist or you're not an artist. You're going to get a lot out of this. So let's just start. And, what is it about your background that brought you into the arts?
Okay. Well, I think there wasn't anything specific, but just always, I think it's intrinsic in me that I was born a super creative kid. And I would just make things out of things and collect pebbles and twigs and make forts, and crayons were my favorite thing ever. I would carry coloring books with me everywhere we went.
Did you really?
Yes. And my favorite thing to do when I visited my grandmother was to go into her sewing room, because she had bolts of fabric and ribbon and trim and buttons. And it was just fantasy world everywhere I looked. So I think I've always had the ability to look at things for their potential and put them together in different ways. And that's kind of translated throughout my life as a thread. And so, yeah, that's pretty much, I think I was kind of born that way.
So I hear this a lot when people feel like they're not necessarily creative, but yet it's because they're so inherently creative,
Yeah.
right? It's just part of who they are.
Yes.
And that sounds like you as well.
Yes.
So when did it happen that you could make maybe not a living, but started making money doing
Yes.
things that were creative? When did
Yes.
that happen?
Oh gosh. Well, that's a really good question, because I studied thinking that I was an artist and a creative. I studied English and art in college, and had so much fun. And I also got into women's studies. And then it came time to figure out what's next. And my dad really wanted me to apply to law school, because he was a lawyer, and he was a first generation American and was the first person in his family to go to grad school or college. So I wanted to go to art school, but my dad said he wouldn't pay for it and encouraged me to go to law school. And I thought maybe I could do something to change the world there, that I could pave the path for the women in my family who are from Mexico and who may have not kind of been encouraged in that direction necessarily. So I did go to law school, and it was a terrible detour. I shouldn't have done it. It was not for me. And at that time, it wasn't really, there was not a lot of public interest in women's kind of work that I was interested in. So I am not a quitter. So I finished, and then I passed the bar and immediately deactivated, and I went to work in a pottery studio. So not the ideal money-making kind of scenario, back to your question, but it kind of led to a series of amazing serendipitous moments for me. And so from that pottery studio, my parents were really mad at me, but I went to a creative women's happy hour.
Yeah, I can imagine what that conversation was like.
Sorry, Dad. I'm doing it my way now.
Right.
But I went to a creative women's happy hour, and I'll never forget, there was a woman in the room, across the room. She was talking about a movie that she was making. And when I heard that she was making a movie, I kind of started stalking her. And I didn't want to be a weirdo, but I stopped her and I said, "Hey, can I take you to coffee? I want to find out more about this movie that you're making." Because in my mind, people made movies in Hollywood, but not in Austin.
Yeah.
So it was cool. She introduced me to someone who, she didn't have a job for me, but she introduced me to someone who might be able to hire me. And the position that they had was to be a production assistant, which is the very bottom of the barrel. And I was thrilled. I could not believe my luck.
Well, you make a really good point. Now to be a PA, to be, a production assistant, that's like the job everybody is trying to get.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to get.
It's hard to get. And it's funny. Like, I'm a lawyer, a licensed attorney.
Yeah.
And I was happy, just ecstatic to go in to work with the art department. And I was, getting lunches for people, emptying trash, like doing those errands, the grunt work. But at the same time, I was being exposed to a whole world that was so creative and so full of promise and possibility. And I got to understand in the art department on movies, the way that movies are made. It takes teams and teams of people. It's layers and layers of creativity. It's like, it starts with, when you think about what a movie is, it starts with one person's idea.
Right.
Then they have to write it down. Then they have to pitch it. I mean, it's like, could go on forever. But
right.
Ultimately, it's several hundred people coming together for months and months. And then, what you manage to accomplish ends up, you're in the dark theater and you see it on the screen. It's really amazing that kind of stuff can even happen. Right.
Right.
But it taught me so much about creative problem solving and collaboration. And it was probably one of the most fun periods of my life. I worked on movies for about 12 years in Austin. And I got lucky because at that time there were a ton of movies being made. So I kind of worked back to back. And I didn't pivot from that business until I had this like crazy opportunity to move to Mexico with my then husband to go build some hotels in Playa del Carmen. So
Wow.
I couldn't turn that down. It's my homeland, right? And I have the cultural fluency for that. And it was just a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I think I've answered your question about how to make money with art, but that's how I started.
Well, yeah. Well, just to, yeah, and it wasn't just so much of like, how do you make money with art? It was more like how you make the leap from being really going to law school, and, and pivoting into the arts. And kudos, by the way, that took chutzpah to say, no, I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the things I've always loved about you. You're so true to yourself.
Well, thank you for saying that, because honestly, I have had moments when I worry that I have not had a straight line path, that I have not known what I was going to do from the very beginning and stuck to it and gotten better and better at it. I've really dabbled in a lot of different industries in a way that, like, looking back on it, makes perfect sense. Like in a
Isn't that funny how
in
that
a
happens?
kismet way,
Yeah.
right? But I mean, I've definitely been hard on myself about like not having gotten all the way to the end of something and mastered it, because I've been trying different things. But what I found looking back on all of it is that I'm always learning and it never stops. And every single point on the path that I've been on has prepared me for the next point.
Right.
And if you could, I try to look at life and look at my work as in the moment and across time. So I can look back and say, oh, when I worked on the movie, I learned all about, not only how a movie gets made, but budgeting for the movie and timelines and all that kind of like project management work, which then ended up helping me in Mexico when I worked on these projects. I got to do really cool stuff because I had the skills that I learned in the art department.
Right.
And I didn't even realize I was preparing for that job in Mexico that I ultimately got, which was super cool.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more, about that. What, from an artistic perspective, what, or creativity perspective, what was that like?
Oh, it was heaven in many ways. We went initially because my husband got hired, and I was excited. I'm Mexican, I'm bilingual, and I was 7 months pregnant and we had a toddler, and we sold everything and moved. And it could have been the Holiday Inn, right? And we would have done it. But it turns out the hotel project was with the core hotel group. And there was an up and coming designer at the time that I'd never heard of, who is now pretty famous. Her name is Kelly Wursler. Uh-huh. So I accidentally landed in Playa del Carmen, really pregnant, with my husband first working, but they quickly realized that I had this kind of cultural fluency and this design background myself. And I started doing little things, and they would send me like to different parts of Mexico to look at tile. And because I had the ability to understand the language and the norms, right?
Right.
And they didn't as much.
Right.
So it was a win-win. But I got to work with Kelly, installing some of the villas that she had designed, the model villas. And I got to, because I knew all that spreadsheet stuff, I got to inventory all I had the first view of what she was sending over for her design and decor, and it's exquisite. And she tends to create things out of nowhere and nothing. Like, she has a lot of bespoke things that she creates. And so I got to see how she would match the history of Mexico and the geography of Mexico with what she was choosing for the project. And then that was something that I brought back with me. I ultimately worked on some hotels in Austin after that. And right. I brought those skills of matching what you're going to place in a space to the history and the soul of the space. Right. And I learned that in Mexico. Right. And I learned it to a certain extent in movies, because you want to be authentic when you're decorating a set. So right. all this kind of stuff, it just kind of is a through line, even though the industries are different.
Right. That is so fascinating, and the way that life has just prepared you for each next thing. So within that, did you have an opportunity to choose art, or was that not in the in the scope of your responsibilities yet?
When I was in Mexico, Kelly was such an incredibly gifted designer and had a very specific vision. So my only creative role with her was I would go find weird stuff that she might like
Yeah.
on the ground. And there were some things, and I found these jungle hippie artisan people that became very dear friends of ours, and they would make furniture and mirrors and bowls out of fallen trees. They were always repurposing trees in the jungle. And so she liked some of those accessories, and some of those were, my finds. But I was just so grateful that I got to be in her orbit,
Yeah.
and learn from her aesthetic.
Yeah.
And mine is different from hers. She's a lot more neutral maybe than I am. I'm more colorful probably.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I got back to Austin and I was working on hotels here that I could really have more of a hand in, the aesthetic decision making.
Right.
And that's fine with me.
Yeah. Well, you got to, earn your chops or learn your chops. I don't even know how you say that. We often joke, like we were saying earlier about our sweaters, we often joke about the similarities between our stories.
Yeah.
And I had a similar story like that. I don't think you know this. I went to work for Carol Bolton in Fredericksburg, who had at the time 5 different home furnishing stores.
I remember those.
Yeah.
They're incredible.
Incredible. And Carol still has stores in Fredericksburg, and she's still an incredible designer. In fact, some of the things in my home are from there. But that's where I started learning design and creativity, and from her. This was back in my 20s, and then people would hire me to help design their homes, and talk about imposter syndrome. Like, you got to be kidding me.
Yes.
I just started this 2 years ago or
Right.
6 months ago or whatever it might be. But that's interesting that we have a similar.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Not surprising, right?
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, I can definitely relate to the imposter syndrome. But the flip side is it's really fun when you notice that everything is connected to everything you've done in the past, and that there are people there to breathe some magic into what's going to end up being your vision, right?
Yes.
And that's how we all do it. We're all kind of out there influencing each other and inspiring each other. I know you're a huge inspiration to me with your artwork, even though our work is very different.
Yeah.
But we both like color a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for people to, after this this podcast comes out, to be able to see your work, because it's very distinct. Folks on my team and I talk about how, when you first came to a workshop, there could be a room of 15 people, and we're all trying to do our own thing, right? But then there'll always be those 1 or 2 artists that have this particular distinct style, not trying to emulate any other artist, and that's you. I mean, I just remember you were in the middle of the room, and people all around you, and I'm looking over here at my teammate Amy, because we're just like, wow, what is this woman and what is she creating? It's really remarkable. So I can't wait for you guys to go to see her work after this. But you were so immersed in the arts.
Yes.
Right. So what inspired you to start writing and start painting yourself?
Oh, okay. So
excuse me while I take a sip of our ranch water.
Cheers. Cheers. Emergency tequila.
That's right.
That's another thing we have in common.
Yeah,
Avid tequila fans.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you're asking me what?
Okay. Yeah. So you were
I
entrenched.
got sidetracked with the tequila.
But you were entrenched in all this design stuff. So was there something that you're like, I'm going to start writing, I'm going to start painting? Did something like that happen?
A little bit. So I've always, I think my whole life, I've been a writer in different ways. A closet writer, probably lots of journals.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was super little, it was pretty chaotic at my house and some, some not great stuff was happening. And so I would escape into books and ultimately into journals as a way to process what was happening. And then I just love words. I'm just a nerd like that. So I've kind of always
Same.
always journaled, and that's been such a like spiritual and therapeutic tool for me. And I knew that I was a good writer because my teachers in school would tell me, and my favorite classes in school were my creative writing classes, and I would really excel. And the irony about that is I made like an A+ in my advanced expository writing class in my senior year in college, right? And I was so proud of myself. I loved my teacher. And then I got to law school. And the first semester, they were like, Ms. Martinez, you don't know how to write. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. I'm so not in the right place right now. I beg your pardon. I do know how to write.
Yeah. I just don't know how to write dry, boring shit. That you're
Exactly. I like my logic is not your logic. Sorry. Let's talk about how they feel. Like, no. Anyway, but there was a specific kind of demarcation of when I started writing and painting, which was my daughter, who is now in her second year in college. She was starting to get ready to leave home for college. And I realized this is the time. My daughter is a wonderful and layered, complex person. And so I realized, like, once she's out of the house, I'm going to have some time. I'm going to have more time than I've ever had. And I was working on some projects that were very creative, but my husband kind of looked at me one night and he said, I think you've outgrown that stuff. That's somebody else's vision still. He said, what if you gave yourself some blank space, some white space? And I thought, okay. And so what I did was I signed up for a retreat in San Miguel de Allende. It's a wild writing retreat, and it's a very powerful truth-telling kind of writing. And I ran across a poet there that I was really inspired by, and I followed her and ultimately got the bravery up to submit my own writing to her literary magazine.
That is no small thing.
I know.
That is
And
terrifying.
I did not expect good news at all, but they accepted one of my pieces, and it was like one of the most exhilarating moments I've ever had in my whole life. Like when I got that email, I remember I was sitting in the parking lot somewhere and I got the email, and I felt like my whole body was just like warm and buzzing, and I was just like, I wish my mom was alive so I could tell her, I didn't know who to tell. But anyway, so that was like the universe saying you should do some writing, right? And it's not because it was published. Like, how many times have you written something and it's not great? But I think it's just whether or not I'd gotten published at that point, I would have still fallen in love with the process of this wild writing format,
right?
And with how much it was bringing forth in me. And then I learned about Jody King, my husband, who is not an artist, who is like hardly ever like points out something fun and cool that he read about. I'm usually the one that's like, check this out. And he brought me an article about Jody King.
Yeah.
And he's like, check this woman out. She is amazing. She's a self-taught artist. And I could not believe it because you're around my age and you had this incredible story and you're so successful, and it was so inspiring. And I was like, I need to find her. And I was intimidated. Like, you really project the power of who you are, right?
And then she got to know me.
No. But I felt like little baby artist, right? Because I hadn't painted in so long. Mm-hmm. And even though I do have a studio space, and I'd had a studio space for a while, I hadn't really gone in there that much. Yeah. When I was doing other stuff. So you and your art was a catalyst for me. I found that you were hosting a retreat in Austin.
Yeah.
And I signed up for it like in a 5 minutes, like it was no question. And I remember that weekend was one of the most fun weekends I've ever had in my whole life. We painted, we danced, we ate tacos, we,
said bad words.
Yes. And then you also started, it was crazy. Okay. When I first met you, it was like, I had known you forever. You're so warm. You were wearing these pink shoes. Do you remember that? These cute pink shoes.
I know my pink shoes, but I don't remember the moment.
And you hugged me like you knew me. And I was like, oh my gosh, this woman. And then one of the first things we did was we did journaling and a meditation. And I was like, oh my gosh, all day long. Like it just spoke to all the things that I really, really care about and that I love. And so that was a really transformative weekend for me. And you taught us the secrets, the color mixing secret, the mother color.
Yes. Also, this is being trademarked, so don't go fucking around and try to do this.
Sorry.
Sorry. It's been happening a lot. So this is bitter Jody coming out.
Not okay. Not okay. So Jody, okay. And actually I had signed up for your color course online before that retreat.
Yeah.
And I had started it. So I had a little taste of it, but it in person was even better. Y'all, if you have a chance to ever do a retreat with Jody, go do it. It is so valuable. It was like life-changing for me. Anyway, and she's not paying me to say this, like seriously.
But it's the tequila.
No, but it changed the way I painted. It changed the colors that I picked because you had a way of presenting the information that I finally understood what the F was going on with this whole thing, why colors speak to each other, how they speak to each other. So I already think that, thank you for saying that you thought my art was nice.
Awesome.
I did not feel that way in that room with all those people. Like I thought I'm the only one that's not doing abstract art here. I'm such an outlier. Like, like what's wrong with me? But I asked you, I said, can I do figurative? Because that's what I like. And you said, yes, do it. And so I didn't realize that that was actually a good thing.
Oh, it was awesome. And just to, put a little spin on this is that there was so much talent in the room.
Yes,
right?
There was. There were people who were selling art in the room. So I was looking at myself like little, like baby artists, like clumsy, redheaded little, stepchild.
But I think this is an important point because I talk about honest art often, and oftentimes we have our own style. Like you had your own style, but we question it. We go, well, but can I do this? And is that going to be, number one, just okay? And number two, is it even viable? Right. If we do feel like outliers, if we do feel like our work is different. And so learning to trust ourselves and learning to trust our style is just a huge part of the artist's journey.
Right. Well, I am still kind of in the middle of it. I'm not fully there where I think that what I'm making is going to speak to somebody else, but I just have to still go with what I'm making because it's coming from inside me and through me. And I can't do something else.
Right.
I can't be someone else. I'm me. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I could say, well, I don't know if you're going to ask me a specific question about it.
No, keep going.
Speaking of style, I'm developing it still, but I do think that I have a certain style, and I realized that some of it came from those women's studies classes that I took in college because it was the first time. I'm from Mexico, and not to stereotype myself, but in general, the generations before mine were very deferential to men and very demure, even though they did wear the pants, but they were demure and maybe not as well educated as they are now. And Mexico's made a lot of strides, but being a female from Mexico, it was like mind blowing to take these women's studies courses and kind of explore, like, what does it mean to be a female, and why is there a wage disparity, and why are the politics where they are? And my gosh, we've gone backwards, haven't we? But that's a whole nother podcast.
So it sounds like you had all of this dormant within you, and then you had your time. And so then you start writing, and then you start painting, and all of this comes up for you.
Yes, it does. And it did. So now it's interesting. The writing and the painting are intersecting in the studio. I realized when my mom was, she passed away a while ago, but when she was getting sick and, I was trying to like sort out my relationship with the end of her life, I remember a lot of things that she used to say to us in Spanish when we were little. And it was like really funny stuff. And some of it was positive, some of it was negative. But there were a lot of kind of directives about being good and being feminine. And I thought, gosh, I want to do a series of paintings about what those directives meant. And so doing storytelling through words and painting became,
Yes.
I was like something new for me, but I tried it. And, some of that the early stuff was really terrible. Like,
Right.
I don't want anyone to ever see it, but I like the idea of it. And so what's happening now is that's evolved and evolved. And what I'm painting now, it still often will have words and, or maybe like lyrics from a song.
Right.
A lot of times it's in Spanish. So it's kind of integrating the different parts of me that want to find a voice, whether it's like a little bit or a lot. Some of it is literal, some of it is more kind of abstract. But yeah, that's my style, I'd say, has a lot of like storytelling and writing and color and figurative forms.
It's incredible. And I love that you said that you had this inkling to start writing and then you didn't care for it, right? But it evolved into something that you do like. And I think that's what happens with us as artists, in which we have this idea, like this spark of inspiration or curiosity. I'm thinking about some of the artists that I've worked with, and like, I want to put words on, on my paintings. And so we try it and then we hate it. And we go, well, that didn't work. I'm not going to do that anymore. But that's not what I heard you did. You're like, okay, let me just keep with this and see how it's going to evolve. And to me, that is a true artist's path.
Yes.
Is you stay in the curiosity and you, as much as possible, which is so hard, stay out of self-judgment.
Yes.
And just continue with what feels, what you can take out of that and what you don't want, and et cetera. And you're so good at that.
Thank
you. To see how your art has evolved through that.
Thank you.
And yet you're not giving up who you are.
Yeah.
You are all of this as a writer, and you are all this as an artist. I mean, you're all of it.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I'm just going to stay here all day. You just keep telling me that.
It's true.
But when you mention that, I think like storytelling has always been a part of who I am, right? With even when I was little and putting like my tea parties together with my dolls and like building a little like fort or whatever, there's always kind of a story there. And movies were storytelling, and, creating environments and hotels it's a story. You're telling a story of a space, or you're creating a story that you want the guests to experience.
Right.
And so I can't not keep trying with these words on my paintings.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just who I am. And I don't know what that like perfect intersection is going to be between writing and painting, or I don't know, maybe it's going to be like a painting that doesn't have words on it, but it has a story piece next to it.
Right.
I'm just kind of open to all of it.
Well, hopefully we never get to that destination where we're done.
Right.
Right. It'll just keep evolving and evolving and evolving until we decide it's time to put the paintbrush down, which, if I know you and we'll have very gray hair, and we'll, go down fighting for sure. But I just want to turn the interview around just a minute.
Yes.
And that is that I feel like you have such experience in so many different fields that you have a lot that you can offer artists, right? In their journey, because I hear so often that artists want to, work with art consultants, or their goal is to have art placed in some of these commercial places where more people can see their art, whether it's a restaurant or it's a hotel or whatever that might be. And because you have a experience of placing that art,
right?
And I know we didn't really talk about that, but let's see. What do you have any general tips that you could give artists? Like, let's say an artist came and said, "Hey, I would love to start getting my work, placed in some of these places." What advice would you give them?
Yes. Well, I have a lot of ideas or a lot of thoughts on that. They're not very organized.
That's good.
But
why would we start now?
Right? Gosh. Okay, but I think it goes back to the idea of when I stalked the woman at the creative happy hour to like ultimately get a job on a movie. You have to take chances. You have to like see yourself. Like, let's say your example is how can an artist put their work in a restaurant, right? You have to I would encourage you to think about all the different ways that you could pick the restaurant, right? Don't if your work is like a certain vibe, if it's like, really gentle and floral, you might not want to be at the, I don't know.
At the big steakhouse in
right,
town.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So kind of pick where you think you want your art to be, and then try to find out who the management group is, and then go to the place in the afternoon before they have the dinner service and say, hey, I would like to find out who the designer is for this space, or if you're open to hanging art. I think a lot of times too, it's a good idea to try to look in the business journal, or in even like there's some Austin Instagram accounts and magazines that are announcing businesses that are gonna open.
Right.
Try to catch that at the very, very beginning of something coming on board so that you can catch the design process before it's done.
So that's really great advice. Any city that you live in, and if you see, a hotel coming up or a restaurant or anything like that, that's when it's not when it's built.
No.
It's in the earlier stages.
So, and I'll speak directly to that. I was lucky because I worked on the hotels in Mexico, and then strangely enough, my now husband, he switched careers and began working in the hospitality business.
Right.
So he knew that I had the ability to select and place art.
Right.
So I got lucky. I had an inside lead on how to start doing that.
Right.
And I did that for some of the properties that we built.
Right.
So I'm not sure that somebody out there in general would have known that we were looking for art, but we did actually for the South Congress Hotel.
Right.
We did put out a call for artists, because what we wanted to do, there's so much bad hotel art, y'all, like, oh my God,
so bad
everywhere. It's getting better, but like, I would say this is a place that the artists should really think about tapping into, because hotels are realizing that it's terrible and they really do want better art. And what we did for South Congress Hotel is we identified, I went to the East Austin studio tour, the West Austin studio tour, and I identified artists that I thought were a good match,
right,
maybe for our aesthetic. And I contacted them, and we paid them to submit samples, so that they would feel valued, because it's important to value an artist's work.
We're just going to say that again for the folks in the back. It's important to value an artist's work and to pay them.
Yes. My gosh. Right.
Yes.
So we paid them for samples, and if we narrowed it down to the 3 or 4 artists that we thought were the best aesthetic match.
So hold on just real quick. When you said you paid them for samples, when you say samples, are you saying that the artist submitted a painting, or was it a print? Or
yes, they submitted whatever we gave them a kind of a general idea of what the aesthetic would be,
right?
And it was up to them whatever they wanted to submit. It could be a drawing, it could be a photograph, it could be a small painting, just something to give us an idea of what they would then create if they were selected.
Okay.
So and then we did narrow it down. And when we chose the artists that we did want to work with, we commissioned them to make 10 to 15 pieces of their original art and to hang in the hotel. And it was a win-win, because we were on a budget and we found artists that were emerging, and they were willing to make work that maybe wasn't super, super high-end expensive, but it feels real and authentic.
Yeah.
So we got super lucky that if you see the artwork in the hotel, it's amazing. Right. Or I mean, not because I picked it, but but I think it's reflective of the vibe of the South Congress Avenue, right? And it's eclectic and all that. Anyway, I would highly encourage anyone listening to think about identifying hospitality groups who are going to come into town and try to get in touch with their designers immediately. And so,
Great.
and see if they need stuff.
That is, and I think so often we think, well, they don't need, they already know what they like, and designers, that feels really, really intimidating. But the truth is, designers are just like, they're looking for the best stuff.
Absolutely.
They're looking for really cool, make it easy for them.
And honestly, I think this is a really untapped area, because even for us, we're a very design driven project, very, very design driven. And yet, even for us, it was an afterthought. It was like, oh, shoot, it's time to get the art. Like, what are we going to do? It was a hurry. Like, we were like, oh my gosh. So I'd say, like, you might present, even if the designer thinks they have what they want, you might present something that is even cooler. And the designer goes, oh, let's do that. Right.
Yeah.
And they don't have to go buy the other thing that might be even more expensive than what you're offering, or whatever,
So that begs the next question of, if you are an artist and you're submitting to, this design group, or should you be submitting original work, or should you be doing prints? And the reason I ask that is, so often we believe that our prices are going to have to be really low for, especially for a hotel or something like that. And so, how much does that play into it? Or does it just depend, and some design groups want original because that's important to their aesthetic? What are your thoughts on that?
I think I'm not sure, but my gut is to say that original is probably preferable in these situations, because that's part of the draw. I think hotels like to say we have original art in our hotel. However, I have been to some really design driven hotels recently that they do have prints of this really cool piece that the artist submitted probably as an original, but then they had prints made of that original piece. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. And I think the answer is, it depends.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to make an assumption, so tell me if I'm wrong. But I think what we do is we just stand in who we are as artists in the work that we do. Mm-hmm. And we submit from that perspective. Right. And being open to whatever the design group, like you're not going to be, a hard ass, right? You're going to be open to working collaboratively with the design group, but just stand in who you are and what you do best.
Absolutely. And then just, I think this is another thing we were going to talk about too, is even if they don't pick your art for that hotel, that designer knows who you are now, and they know your work, and they might have a perfect project on the next project.
Right.
And a lot of times I don't know. I mean, we did it for us, but hotels might hire a local designer so that they can have a local flavor. They might be a big hospitality group, but they hire a local designer, and that local designer also has interior residence clients, who they might need your work for someone's home. And you submitted for the hotel and they didn't pick you, but they know about you, and now they might pick you for somebody's home. So I think interior designers in general are a great resource for emerging artists and artists who want to get their work out there.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I've said this before, but artists always are thinking that their pinnacle is going to be the gallery system. Like, if I could just get into a gallery, that would just, validate me as an artist, validate my work, all of that. But the truth is, there are 4 times as many interior designers as there are galleries. And if your goal is to sell art, you're really missing a huge opportunity by not, at least, it doesn't have to be an either or, but you're missing a huge opportunity by not tapping into designers in your area.
Absolutely. I think if, be creative about how you can find designers in the first place. Like, ask your friends, who are your interior design friends? And ask if you can have, like, if there's one that, is super friendly and open and maybe starting out, ask if you can take them to coffee and say, hey, would you need my work? Or can you just give me some advice? Or can you turn me on to someone who you think does need my work? And I think it's just back to that point about, like, stalk the person at the party, right?
Yeah.
Just keep trying and put yourself out there and stay open, because that's when the magic happens.
Yes.
And if I hadn't probably stalked you a little bit with your retreats. And
Yeah.
I don't think that we would be sitting here right now, because after I realized how valuable and magical working with Jody and learning from her was, I couldn't stop. I was like, I hope someday she'll want to have a drink with me, and here we are.
Yeah.
But I do think
Drinking on camera.
Yes. Hello. Wait till we start dancing. Dance class coming up. But yeah, I think there are lots of ways to get your artwork out there, and also East and West. East Austin Studio Tour, West Austin Studio Tour, get in there. I have seen some really just okay stuff as a person walking through it.
Yeah.
And some really amazing stuff. And every time I walk there, I go, why am I not showing my work?
Yeah.
Because there's all kinds of stuff there.
So what if somebody, say, lives in Philadelphia, a place that really I have I don't have any information in, but you're an artist in this city, and you're like, I'm not part of, I'm just creating out of my home, and I love what I do. It sounds, and I'm really curious about what your thoughts are in this, because you're one of your gifts is you are a networker. You're not afraid to say, hey, let's, to meet new people and all that. You're so brilliant at that. But let's say there's an artist in this city, and they're painting in their bedroom, and they're wondering why they're not selling all their art on social media. I hear this all the time. Well, I post it on social media, and that's my strategy. And it has to be more than that. You have to cast your net and put yourself out there a little bit more. So what would your recommendations be?
Okay. This is hilarious because as we speak, I'm giving advice to people about getting their work out there. And I have been so scared to put my work out there. In fact, I'm going to use this podcast as a courage exercise to finally launch my own Instagram, which we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah.
But anyway, my advice for somebody in Philadelphia, we don't know those cities, but I think the common thread is get out there to creative events.
Yes.
And something like creative mornings,
Yeah.
Start to get into the little pockets of places where creatives are meeting and gathering, and free workshops, and you'll start to meet the people who are interested in the same things, and just keep asking questions. You don't have to be a great people person. I feel dorky and awkward and embarrassed half the time, right? I'm not a good stalker.
Which is just so odd to me.
But I think almost every single really cool thing that happens is because you took a chance, and because you were a little bit brave, and because you started to breathe life into your fantasy.
Okay, hold on. That is such a, as Oprah would say, that's such a tweetable moment.
Let's tweet. Amy, you got that?
Yeah. So every good thing that happens, it comes because you put yourself out there scared, and you just have to be brave, and you have to breathe. What is it you said? Breathe life.
Yes.
Into your
dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's something I have to remind myself to do every day,
Yeah.
It's hard, and it's
so
scary,
hard.
But we're doing it.
We are doing it. And the comfort zone is where all of our dreams go and die.
Exactly. It's so true. It's really comfortable though, but
so comfortable, but it's a graveyard for your dreams. So I have to remember that. There are some times where I don't leave my home, for days and days on end. And I'm like, gosh, why am I feeling a little sad? I'm like, because
because you've isolated yourself.
Imagine that. And even at this point in my career, it's a reminder. Get out there and stay, because it invigorates us and it inspires us, and we're artists. What more, inspiration is everything. Right?
Absolutely. Oh, one more idea too is, for me, when I worked on movies, we were always super careful to not use artwork that we were going to use without permission for the sets. And I don't know what's going on these days with sourcing artwork that's clear to use. It's called
Right.
clearances. In fact, that was my first job on my first movie, was to do the legal clearances and also run the coffee orders. Anyway, so, but one idea is to contact the film commission in whatever state you live in
Okay.
and see the list of production designers and set decorators and just try to get in touch with them and say, I will make art for your movie that you have permission to use if you have that need.
That is a great tip.
Yeah.
That's one I haven't heard before.
Right. I mean, we did sometimes commission artists so that we didn't have to deal with the copyright and license issues.
Right.
And it was also affordable, and it was like good juju. It was, like it was good stuff to use a real artist instead of just some weird random piece of art that we couldn't figure out who had made it, you know?
So that helps the artists. Well, it helps everybody, right? You get great quality art. That's number one. But then as an artist, you get to have that on your CV.
Sure.
Or just, if you don't, forget CV, you just get to have it as your bragging rights.
Yeah. Also, you can rent it to the movie, and then you get to keep it. And then it's got cachet, because let's say your art was in the Barbie movie, or whatever.
Yeah.
Then, like, if the movie really like goes viral, then or whatever, then your piece is value and it's still yours.
So you make a great point about that, about renting. And this is something that I don't have a lot of experience with renting. How would an artist know how to rent? Is that something that the production company would set, like, this is what we're willing to rent? Or is it something that artist needs to know? Like, how would an artist know that ahead of time?
I would say you heard it here. So you have options. It's going to depend on the needs of the production. But in order to keep things affordable, I know that when we needed art, sometimes we would say, will you rent it to us? Because it'll be $100, a day or whatever it was. And it was more affordable than us buying this really more expensive piece. But if it's better for you to sell it, like, maybe it's probably case by case, but explore that. And they will tell you if they'd rather rent it. They will tell you, because a lot of times they don't have the storage space. They don't want to acquire something. They just want to use it.
What are they going to do with it afterwards?
Yeah, it's a very, disposable or, pop-up kind of situation where they use it for 2 days and then they don't need it anymore and they don't want to deal with it.
Right.
So you can rent it for a few days and then rent it again, or sell it to someone else who thinks it's cool that it was in a movie.
Yeah. I love that. We have gone so far off, but I feel like we have talked about a lot of things. Let me just ask you this, because I know you've already offered so much value to artists. So thank you. But before we wrap this up, we have a tradition here where a previous guest asks a question for another guest, and they never know who it is.
Right.
So we have your question, and here it is. Do you have a piece that you've created that perfectly depicts your soul? And if so, can you tell us the story behind it? I love that question.
That's a great question. It's also a little hard to answer.
Yes. Especially if you paint often, you're like, oh, that reflects my soul today. But the other one, like last week.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And I'm going to cop out a little and say a little bit of that. Because truly, before I came on this, or yesterday, I went and got a manicure because I was going to be here. And the manicurist was like, what's this? And she was disgusted. And she showed me a part of my arm, and it was covered in different colored paints. And I guess it was stuck. I had showered, but it was still there. Anyway, I've been in the studio a lot, which has been so fun. And I feel like I've turned a corner, which has been so fun. So it's hard for me to answer this question because there are a few pieces that I feel that way about right now. But the commonality of them is that they have a saying in Spanish on them, and they have a lot of energy and color. And there's little pockets of symbology in them. Maybe like I realized I wasn't trying to make like a mountain or a house in the background,
Right.
but there's a little house there.
Yeah.
And there's a little mountain there and there's a plant. And like,
isn't that funny how that happens?
so that's what I was saying about dreamscapes, is that sometimes I think things that are in the back of my mind or in my heart, I don't even know they're going to come out. But in the shapes that I'm making, I see these little delightful. So the way that reflects my soul is that I do think my Hispanic heritage is a big part of who I am.
Of course.
And I've had to, be a very Americanized version of myself in this city and in general. And I'm grateful that I have access to both these amazing cultures.
Right.
But these pieces that I think reflect my soul have a Mexican element to them. And also they're figurative and they're about women. And there's a lot of color and energy, and there's no white space. Like people say, like, let the eye rest. Well,
too bad.
Your eye is not going to rest because it's, I think my mind is very active and I have a lot of ideas at all times. And so that's what you see in these paintings. And, might not be for some people, but those paintings are very reflective of like kind of the layers of the way that I think about life and the kind of the way that it all can kind of come together as a story, even though it's a little bit disparate. Right.
Right.
So,
well, just because I'm so familiar with your art, you may not consider it may not be considered white space, but the way your work is there are conversations.
Yes.
And if you're sitting at the dinner table and everybody is speaking really loudly, no one can hear any really conversation. And so that's, I think, the idea of white space is to give that take a breath, right?
Yes.
But if you have some conversations that are a little quieter,
yeah,
and you have some other conversations that are a little more, boisterous, you can have those at the same table.
Yes.
And that to me is what's beautiful about your work.
Thank
is
you.
that you have several conversations,
Yes.
and you just want to linger in the painting in hopes that you can pick up on all of them.
Yes. And it really also goes down to like the technical aspects of what you taught us about color with hue and having a variety of brushstrokes and a variety of hues.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot going on in the paintings, but there is definitely like light and dark and all that.
Yeah.
So,
just to stay in that.
And I learned that from you.
I could offer something. All right. So, you just answered beautifully that question. Do you have a question for the next guest?
Yes, I do. And this goes back to me, like, I need to practice what I preach and get my work out there because I've been super shy. So my question is, how do you know when it's time? How do you know your work is ready? How do you know it's finished and not good enough? That's such a terrible way to put it. But, how do you know it's gotten dressed and wants to leave the house?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great question. And I think it's important for every artist I think it's important for us as artists to hear what other artists have to say, because it is different for all of us.
Yes.
But it could inspire someone to go, oh, maybe today is the day that I'm going to, come out of the closet per se and let the world know that I in fact am an artist. This has been the most incredible conversation. Anytime I get to spend with you is great, but I love this because I think your experience and your knowledge, you have so much to offer.
Thank you.
Artists everywhere. So how can artists find you? How can everyone find you?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you. It's been such a privilege and I just adore you and everything that you're doing for artists.
Thank you.
So I have a website. It's anastapleton.com, ANASTAPLETON.com. And also my new, yet to be launched, but today I think is the day, Instagram account is Anna Stapleton Art, ANA Stapleton ART.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anna Stapleton Art.
Yes.
Find her on Instagram and show her some love, especially after all of the value she's given us today.
And if there are any questions after this, people are free to, I am happy to answer and delve into it. I mean, we all have to help each other. I love that part of it,
Absolutely.
We're all together in it.
We are all in this together, and it's all, the law of reciprocity. The more that we
Yes.
put out, the more
Yes.
that comes back to us.
Absolutely.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining us today
Thank
on the
you.
Honest Art Podcast with my guest, Anna Stapleton. Y'all take care of each other. Wait, let me try that again. Y'all take care of one more time. Y'all take care of yourselves and each other. I've got exciting news. I've just finished up a collection that I'm releasing on November 11th, on 11/11. So once a year, I paint a collection of 20 small 12-inch by 12-inch paintings to offer to my collectors. I like to be able to offer these because they're at a little bit more approachable price point, but they're still original art. So this collection is a bit of a new direction for me creatively, and I don't think I've ever been so excited about a collection before. I can't wait to share these pieces with you. Because I only have 20 of them, I offer them to the collectors on my email list first. So if you'd like to be the first to see and have access to the collection, be sure to get on my email list. I'll go ahead and put a link in the show notes to make it easy to get on the list.